Hey everyone, greetings from Miami. Today I want to talk a bit about the worst advice in self-help, which is to stop caring what other people think about you. I'm going to explain why I think it's impossible, but also counterproductive, and what we should be doing instead. So maybe I'll begin with story time, which is why this idea pulled me so much in the first place. When I just got into college, I immediately dropped out after a semester to build a tech startup, and the startup ended up crashing and burning, and it was a terribly painful experience and part of my life. Now, when I sat down and meditated and tried to figure out what had happened, because I wanted to make sure this never happened again, it became very clear that I didn't really want to build the startup in the first place. And the only reason I did it was because of social expectation. I think it's somewhat humorous that when people in tech, especially in elite college CS programs, conform these days, they drop out, right? The conformist path is dropping out. That's the cool thing to do. And that's what motivated me. And so I dreaded waking up in the morning and working. And so because of that core issue, that affected the entire enterprise. So I was definitely very upset by this, and as a result, I got into philosophy. I wanted to diagnose what had happened, and I got into the philosophy of the French thinker René Girard. And so Girard talks a lot about mimetic desire, how our desires, many of them, come externally from imitating others, and how this leads our life astray, right? That's the core focus of his theory, at least. And when I first learned about this concept, I did perhaps what immediately any hasty young man would have done, which is I immediately tried to renounce it. I immediately tried to, as the advice goes, stop caring what other people think about me. So I packed my bags, moved to a monastery in Nepal, which I practiced in for a few months. I deleted all of my social media. I switched from computer science, gave up my work and my job in tech, and went back and did philosophy. And I even started doing these crazy social experiments where, they're not experiments, they're more like exercises, where, for example, you go into an elevator, and a full elevator, and everyone's facing out towards the door, and you want to be facing in towards everyone, because it's very uncomfortable. I also did this stuff where I would pick the busiest street in Vancouver I could find, and I would lay down on the sidewalk. And the whole idea of these exercises is like exposure therapy, to show you that what other people care about you and what they think of you don't matter, right? Now, the issue with this, I think philosophically, is that humans are social creatures through and through, and our desire for recognition is as necessary and unavoidable as our desire to breathe, to eat, to sleep. And so when people follow this advice, what really happens, I think, is two things. One thing is that people try to project an identity of themselves as someone who doesn't care, and they want to win social validation for that. So one of my friends in college, for an entire semester, he went around telling people that he didn't care what people thought of him. But of course, if he actually didn't care, he wouldn't have told anyone, right? So what he was really saying was, I want you to think of me as someone who doesn't care what other people think about me. Now, another thing that tends to happen is that these communities that center themselves around renouncing the rat race, renouncing social hierarchies and expectations, they quickly develop hierarchies and social expectations and prestige and status symbols of their own. And so spend some time with like hippies, and they have things that they think are cool and not cool. In Buddhist sanghas today, it consists of a lot of people who are tired of the rat race in the world, who are tired of climbing the career ladder. But what often ends up happening is that when they join these communities and devote their lives to these sanghas and communities, they end up pursuing those same goals inside those communities. So instead of climbing the corporate the career ladder, it's how can I be the favorite student of the master, right? How can I achieve the status symbols within this local community? And I think that just goes to show how necessary this desire of recognition is. And so the goal for us is not to stop caring what other people think. It's not to renounce this desire for recognition. It's how can I properly direct it? And I think the answer is two broad strokes, at least. The first thing to say is we do want to develop a core and strong sense of what we actually want to be doing, absent from the opinion of others, as well as self-esteem. So for me, it took me a long time, maybe better half of a decade, to come to terms with the fact that I just didn't like building companies that much, and what I loved doing was philosophy. But once you find these things out about yourself, it really is night and day. So the difference I would describe is when I was building the tech startup, even if I had won, I had failed. So even if I spent all of my 20s building a tech company and it ended up being the most important company of the century, I would still view that internally as some kind of failure because I spent the majority of my most vivacious years in my 20s dedicated to a craft, a pursuit that I actually didn't really care about. Now, when I think about what I'm doing now with philosophy, it's the exact opposite kind of setup where even if I fail, I would win. Even if after 2 years, everyone stops watching my stuff, I go bankrupt, I had won because I spent the best years of my life doing something I absolutely loved. Now, before there were, when I was building that first company, there were days where I'd wake up and I would dread going to work. But now there's a bit too many days, frankly, where I wake up in the middle of the night so excited that I can't fall back to sleep. Right? So that's the monumental difference between figuring out what you actually want to be doing, absent from what other people think about you, and not. And that's incredibly important. Now, that's not to say that, or let me put it this way, that is not in conflict with the idea that you should still be seeking recognition. The fact that you found something that is valuable for its own sake does not mean you should give up this idea of seeking recognition. In fact, I think the whole insight is you want to seek recognition from places and sources that are healthy so that you don't seek it from places that are unhealthy, right? So it's what is called a hydraulic view of human nature. Hydraulic meaning water pressure. If water pressure doesn't come out this way, it has to come out that way. And so you want the water pressure to come out in a productive way. And so, for example, Plato talks a lot about the three parts of the soul, right? There's the rational part of the soul, and that's the philosophical part, the part that aims for truth. There's the spirited part, right? This is what we've been talking about. This is the part that desires recognition. And finally, there's the appetitive part, the part with the lower, more base desires. And when the appetitive part rules, for example, it desires money, and it convinces spirit to be on its side. So the spirit, meaning you want to be honored as rich, you only look up to people who are rich. What you get is an oligarchic man, right? Someone who just loves money. So that's one of the failure cases in Plato. But what's really interesting is the success case in Plato is not when this spirited part, it's not when you stop caring, period, what other people think about you. It's when reason co-ops spirit. So spirit is no longer aligned with appetitive desires, but is allied with reason. So spirit makes you shameful when you're doing bad things, unvirtuous things. Spirit makes you feel honored when you do good things. Spirit honors other philosophers, and you desire to be honored as a philosopher yourself. And that's the kind of intuition I think we want to apply to our lives. And so the obvious question is, how do we do this? And there's so much to say here, but I think the simplest cut is we don't want to chase the recognition of just anyone. We want to chase the respect of people whom we respect. In other words, after we are cleared about what our values are, what we want to be doing, absent from recognition, right? This is the first step that I talked about. We should only pursue the recognition of people who also have achieved and affirmed those values. And the reason, so, okay, let me give you an example. In my case, when I put out these videos, I should not be concerned about what just anyone online has to say about my content. I should focus heavily on people that I honor and respect on their philosophical skill. Those are the people that I should pay attention to, and those are the people that I should try to win recognition from. Why does this work? It's because if you can affirm their values, right? People who judge you, if you can affirm their values, if you want those values internally anyway, then when you try to win their recognition, you're not doing anything other than trying to achieve what you already think to be inherently worthwhile. So by respecting those by seeking recognition only from those whom I already respect, I'm not pursuing any set of values that is alien or different from what I already affirm myself. Okay, there's so much more to say here, both on how mimesis and sociality can lead us astray, as well as on how to properly structure a recognitive environment. And I'll link a whole series of lectures and interviews I've done on the topic if you're interested, but I wanted to give you a first pass. So I hope that was somewhat useful and not too confusing.